The wood fire blazed heartily in the ample fireplace, sending its warmth and light far out into the lobby of the inn. Red and orange light flickered around the curiously twisted staircase railing, giving the area a false sense of tranquility. Von Voss was sitting patiently on the couch when a polite knock on the front door jostled him. He picked up his cane, stood, and walked to the adjoining window. Then, parting the drapes slowly, he cautiously looked outside. At the front door stood a man he immediately identified as one of the card players earlier that day. The man was holding a white dishcloth, waving it in the air as if signaling some desire to communicate. Von Voss placed his hand on the butt of the revolver he had put in his coat pocket to ensure that it was there before he unbarricaded the door. Then, stepping back, he used his cane to push down on the door handle and pull it open. "May I help you?" he asked politely, as if nothing was fallacious.
"I wish to negotiate,"
the man replied coldly. There was no emotion in his voice.
"State your terms, then." "Bring me the tender meat, and we will let you and the ghost woman leave."
Von Voss placed his hand into his pocket and grasped the revolver, pulling the hammer back with his thumb.
"Tender meat? I do not understand what you mean." "The young woman. The one with the red hair. We want her life, in exchange for yours and the ghost woman. We played cards for her, and I won. So, you see, the tastiest parts are mine."
After he spoke, a drool of saliva rolled off his thick, chapped lips, and he took a step forward.
"I think not,"
Von Voss shouted as he lifted his cane, striking the man on the bridge of his nose with the silver headpiece. Blood splattered across the man's face and clothing as he reeled backward, screaming in pain. Wiry black hairs sprouted from his greasy skin as it split apart like tree bark. His bones shifted under his skin like mechanical snakes, with loud cracking noises as an inhuman growl erupted from his lungs. Von Voss did not wait for the rest of the transformation. Pulling the revolver out of his coat pocket, he fired, striking the inhuman figure in the forehead, blowing brain matter and parts of his skull across the porch. Slamming the front door, he barricaded it and shouted to the women upstairs.
"Battle stations, ladies!"
An eerie howl echoed across the landscape that was soon joined by several others. The battle for their lives had begun. Fortunately, there was one silver weapon at Von Voss's disposal. Placing the revolver back in his pocket, he lifted the cane and twisted several metal rings near the top until a click sounded. Rotating the silver head of the cane, the silver blade inside dropped. It glistened in the flickering light from the fire, over a foot in length. Drawing the revolver from his pocket, he backed up and prepared for the assault. He didn't have to wait long as he noticed shadows moving quickly past the windows near the door. A sudden eruption of glass followed as the first werewolf burst through the window on the left, bearing its razor-sharp canines as its ears flattened. It happened so quickly that Von Voss did not have time to aim and fire his pistol, so he sidestepped to the left, throwing the silver blade of the cane out in front of him. Unable to slow its momentum, the beast drove forward as the silver blade pierced its heart. Spinning backward and to the right, Von Voss removed the blade from the creature's chest in one swift action. It emitted a half-scream and yelp as it fell to the floor beside him, twitching as it started the transformation back into a human, another one of the card players. Lifting the revolver, he hastily fired at the second shadow moving behind the right window. The shadow dodged to the right and vanished from view. Upstairs, Arundel had taken up a position by the door, her quintessence shield faintly illuminating the dark room. Tesla stood back by the window, the pistol quivering in her right hand as the sounds of the battle echoed up the stairs. Her whole body shuddered with nervous energy, and she was sure that Ari could hear her bones rattling with the constant fear of the threat that loomed before them. Her mind flickered back to the attempts to cast her own shield. Hopefully, she would not have to use it, but from the sounds of the activity downstairs, she should be ready to try, just in case. She began to softly whisper the chant to awaken the quintessence. "Sky above me, earth below me, aether within me." Just as she felt the energy begin to stir, Tesla was distracted by the sound of claws scratching up the side of the wooden exterior of the inn. The clawing noises came from multiple directions, as if several of the lycanthropes were scaling the inn at once. Arundel frantically looked around the room as footsteps could be heard ambulating down from the ceiling outside. "They are on the roof! Stay away from the window!" she shouted at Tesla as the noises grew louder. The footsteps moved across the roof and seemed to congregate near the far right corner of the building. "What are they doing?" Tesla whispered, just loud enough to be heard. Arundel put her finger to her lips to tell her to be quiet as she turned her head back and forth, trying to discern exactly where the intruders were. The minutes ticked by at an agonizing pace as they waited for an answer. It finally came, as a loud caterwauling of snapping timber and falling debris. Arundel's eyes grew wide. "They are breaking in from the roof." She turned and unlocked the door before looking back at Tesla. "Stay put. Lock the door behind me." She hastily opened the door and vanished, closing it behind her before Tesla could say a word. As Tesla moved to the door to bolt it shut, several more gunshots rang out from downstairs. She was fumbling with the latch when the window behind her was smashed to smithereens by a clawed, hairy arm. She spun around immediately as the werewolf struggled to get through the broken panes of glass, emitting a low growl as it pulled back its lips to reveal its large, dagger-like teeth, white as ivory and 2 inches in length. "Merde!" she cried desperately as she raised the gun and fired. The bullet missed its target, striking the wall next to the window. The beast lifted itself upwards as it squeezed its hips through the narrow opening. Tesla aimed again and fired twice, hitting it square in the chest, but the bullets only seemed to anger it further. "Merde, merde, merde!" she cursed as she continued to fire. The pistol recoiled in her hands as she repeatedly fired until she heard nothing but a dull click. She had run out of bullets, and the werewolf was now entirely inside the room, preparing to lunge. She closed her eyes tightly and tried to concentrate as she swung her right arm in an arc. "Quintessence bouclier!" she screamed as she opened her eyes. But in her haste to say the power words to activate her shield, she said them in French, not Latin. In a burst of blue light, the shield materialized in full size, just like Arundel's. The energy pulsed across its diameter as the werewolf landed from its jump, its teeth reaching for her throat as it struck the quintessence barrier with its open mouth. The force of the beast's momentum sent both of them through the closed door, which splintered apart as the werewolf bit forcefully on the edge of the quintessence shield. The magical protection easily repelled the attack, breaking its fangs in half. Its bloody teeth fell to the floor like someone had cast a fistful of dice down the hall. Tesla landed on her back as the werewolf screamed in agony, holding its bleeding mouth with its clawed hands as it backed away. The fall hurt, but adrenaline surged through her veins as Tesla rolled over and got back on her feet. Then, surging forward, she struck the lycanthrope with the shield, knocking it to the floor. She let the anger take over as she drew her arm back and used the shield's edge to repeatedly hit the werewolf's skull. Finally, on the 4th strike, its skull burst open, sending a splatter of blood and gore upwards that hit her directly in the face. Spitting, she backed up and wiped the mess off with the sleeve of her dress. "Ew, that's gross!" she whelped, still able to smell the vile substance on her cheek and hair. The beast's crimson blood oozed down the quintessence shield in thick droplets that spattered on the wooden floor, staining the lower part of her dress in a macabre polka dot pattern. She fought the urge to vomit as a wave of nausea caught her off guard. The sound of Arendel's panicked voice brought her back to the seriousness of the moment. "Tesla! Behind you!" She turned just as another werewolf leaped towards her, hitting the shield with such force that it drove her backward against the railing of the stairs. Dazed and confused, the creature stumbled back and leaned against the wall, shaking its head in bewilderment. Regaining her balance, Tesla held the quintessence shield in front of her, preparing for the monster's next attack, when the shield blinked on and off. She could feel the power draining away as the shield slowly dimmed and vanished completely. Frantically, she tried to reactivate the spell, as the werewolf's ears perked forward, and it curled back its lips into a smile. "Quintessence bouclier! Quintessence bouclier! Quintessence bouclier!" But despite performing the steps correctly, the shield refused to materialize. Tesla's heart raced as she realized she was now without a weapon. In the grip of silent panic, adrenaline pumped through her system like it was trying to escape. The werewolf advanced slowly, baring its claws as it approached closer. It felt like her heart would explode, and in desperation, she acted. Jumping on the banister, she slid down to the ground floor with the lycanthrope in hot pursuit. Once again, fear found her. It spoke to her in its cackling voice, telling her legs to go weak and her stomach to lurch. Sliding off the bottom of the banister, she turned and fled into the lobby. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Von Voss fighting off another one of the beasts, and she started to run towards him when the pursuing werewolf leaped off the stairs and landed in front of her. The moment played out in slow motion as she slid to a stop and fell backward into the center of the lobby. She scuttled back to her feet as the werewolf circled around her to block her only way of escape. Seeing no other option, she went ghost and crossed the veil just as the creature leaped towards her. It sailed directly through her invisible apparition and smashed head first into the fireplace in a burst of sparks and black smoke. The werewolf screamed in agony as it pulled itself out, the fire spreading across its thick, greasy hair, engulfing the beast in flame. The stench of burnt hair filled the room as the shrieking lycanthrope bolted for the open doorway. It had barely traveled a few feet when a gunshot echoed outside the building, the bullet striking it in the chest. The burning creature abruptly paused and fell lifeless to the floor, its smoldering corpse making a sickening sound as it hit the ground.